Pensions webinar. They are both experts in this area and have supported practices and practice staff and GPs for a significant amount of time. So I would like to hand over to Simon and James, who will talk a little bit more about their background, and then we'll get into the detail of NHS pensions. So over to you, Simon and James.
Right, thank you, Helen. Much appreciated. So yes, my name is Simon Appleyard. I'm a regional manager with Wesleyan Financial Services. I've been working with primary care for 16 years now. Yes, I have a depth of knowledge, I think, in terms of financial planning generally with GPs, but certainly when it comes to the NHS pension. James, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Simon. So yes, I'm James Gunnery. I'm a financial consultant for Wesleyan Financial Services based here on the Wirral, South Cheshire and South Liverpool. And I've been looking after GPs and their practice staff and their practices now for about 8-9 years, I think. So quite local to a lot of you. So I'll be here answering any questions that you may have in the background, and then also a Q&A towards the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Right. So Wesleyan, I'm hoping you're all very familiar with who we are, particularly for those that will have seen the work we've done within medical schools and going on throughout through early years and obviously out into the world of GP, etc. We are a mutual organisation, which means that we don't have shareholders taking profits away. We solely exist for the benefit of our members, so our policy holders. And we are specialists, and that's the point, is that we've been, as a company, we spend our time providing advice, particularly to particular professions. In this instance, we look after those in primary care and everything that pertains to that. It means that we provide advice in a range of areas, and I'll explain a little bit more about what advice is in a second. But suffice to say, we're a safe pair of hands when it comes to discussing this particular topic. Right, so today we will cover why to even think about retirement. And I think our audience today includes a lot of people quite early in their career. And you go, well, why would I be looking at retirement now? I've got an awful lot of other things on my plate, and we'll cover that. We'll look at some of the mechanics of the pension scheme itself so that we can give you a base understanding of what everything means. We will also look at the tax implications. We'll look at the other benefits that you get along with the pension. And then we'll look into a little bit of the mechanics of your role in terms of the impact on people like for those that are working within sessional work. Right, and now I'll apologise in advance. For some reason, somebody's turned on the timings, which forward slides for me, and I can't turn it off. So bear with me if it's a little bit disjointed. This is when we start with everybody in terms of financial planning. Financial planning, of which your NHS pension is a huge part, it comes down to a very simple idea. And it comes to working out these steps. It's about understanding your plan. It's about understanding what it is you want to achieve in life. And in this instance, we're talking about something that for some of you is a very, very long way away, which is retirement. But it's also things like goals you might have for children's education, lifestyle, holidays, travel, simple things, moving up and down the property ladder, all of these things that you might want in your life. And what you then need to do is sit down and look at, well, what am I doing about it? What's my current strategy? For some of you might say, well, I don't have a strategy, which in itself is a strategy. Doing nothing and hoping for the best is probably not the most sensible strategy, but it's one that can work. But the idea is that if you marry up what you want to happen and look at what you're doing about it, and then assess what's the gap between, that's financial advice. Okay, so you develop your own strategy and then you implement it and keep it under review. It means that you can always have confidence. If you've done that for yourself, if you've invested in yourself, you can have confidence. That's one thing you don't have to worry about. You can concentrate on your career without having to worry about the money side of things. Okay, right. So, building for retirement. Well, let's start with why bother thinking about it now, and it tallies in with what I've just said there. This is all about making sure that at some point in the future, wherever that may be, you have sufficient money, be it income or capital, to retire. And that doesn't matter whether that's partially retire, as take a slow landing, or where you at some point will go, that's it, I'm cashing in my stethoscope and calling it a day. It's about having a long-term plan. If all you do is think about retirement when you get within 5 years of it, you are leaving yourself a hostage to fortune as to whether what you want to happen in retirement actually is feasible. The earlier you start just keeping your eye on this, the easier it is to plan for and therefore achieve the kind of retirement you want. So, what does that mean? Building the perfect retirement. Well, the phrase I use all the time is asking you, do you know what your magic number is? Your magic number, and you each will have a different number for this, but your magic number is the amount of income and or capital that you need to have the retirement you want. How do you establish that? Well, there is a very useful website actually called Retirement Living Standards, put together by Loughborough University, I think. And what it does is it breaks down what does a very basic retirement, a moderate retirement, and a comfortable retirement look like in terms of money today. So that's a good place to start. But actually, why not start with going, well, who do I anticipate spending my retirement with? And the older you are, the more clear that will be. Most important, I think, in some ways, is what are you going to do? Now, this lovely slide has golf in there as potentially therefore what you're going to want to do. I don't like golf, so I'm not sure how many of you play golf, but the point is you work very hard, okay? And if you think about the breakdown of your typical day, these numbers might not sound good, but theoretically you sleep for 8 hours, you work for 8 hours, and I appreciate that's the bit that will not quite be realistic, and then you have 8 hours worth of leisure. It doesn't cost you very much to sleep. It doesn't cost you very much to actually go to work. The bit that costs you money is the leisure. The bit that grows exponentially when you retire is the leisure. And having an understanding of the sorts of things you might want to do with your life is actually not as hard to extrapolate out from retirement back to where you are now, because most of you will want to do the things you like doing now, but just more of it. So if you like traveling, you want to do more traveling. If you do like playing golf, you'll want to play more golf. It's something that you can sit down and go, if I was to retire tomorrow, no matter how young you are now, you could probably say, well, I want to do this in my working week. And you can work out how much that might cost. Where you might want to spend your time. There's the other thing. Where are you going to live? What are you already in your forever home? You know, do you want to be in this country? Do you want to be living in Spain? Do you want to be living in the Highlands of Scotland? Where do you want to be? And all of that will help actually look at, well, when? And if you know your magic number, that makes this bit a bit easier, because you might have as your priority, well, I definitely want to retire at 55. I definitely want to work all the way to state retirement. Do you? So the question of when is important in terms of how quickly you fund things. And then you've got to understand what are your priorities. If you do that bit of work and work out what your magic number is, the when and so much of your planning is predicated by, well, when do I get to my magic number? So someone might say, I'd love to retire at 65, but earlier if I can. The earlier is have you achieved your magic number? The thing I hate hearing more often than not is people saying, well, look, my pension's good. and I'll cut my cloth accordingly when I get to that point, when I can't go any further, when I've had enough. And that's heartbreaking, because why should you compromise and cut your cloth in any way, shape, or form when you can plan for it beforehand? So understanding and having that thought process sooner rather than later means you can then think about how are you going to do it. And that's what the rest of this is about. But it's always worth starting at that point, investing yourself, have a think about what your magic number might be. Okay, so there have been some changes in recent years. You may have been aware of this. These are the 3 schemes you might be members of. Now, all of you that are active members of the pension scheme right now are in the 2015 section. There may be some of you who are sessional GPs that are a bit longer in the tooth, who have 95 section, and some may have 2008. So very quickly, the 1995 section was a care scheme, a career average revalued earnings scheme, which, there you go, it's timed me out, which basically meant that at the age of 60, you would receive 1.84% of the deemed pot you've accrued, and I'll explain how that works a bit later. And that there would be basically for every year's service, you get a bit added to your pot of what your earned income goes in there, your pensionable earned income goes in there, and 1.4% of that pot is paid to you as an income from the 1995 scheme, plus 3 times that number as an automatic lump sum. You could go earlier than 60, but you would pay a penalty for doing so. But from 60, you'd be able to take those benefits. Away you go. Dear me, that's starting to get worse. Right. However, the scheme decided that wasn't as sustainable as they'd like it to be, so gave you the option in 2008, or indeed if you started in 2008 onwards, you would be in the 2008 section. This changed slightly. It became more generous, 1.87% of total earnings, but there was no automatic lump sum. So you'd have to buy that lump sum at a rate of £12 of lump sum for every £1 of income given up. So if you were going to get £10,000 worth of pension, if you gave up £1,000 of that, £9,000 a year worth of income, plus a £12,000 lump sum, etc. But the key was that the normal pension age changed to 65. So you could go earlier, you could go at 55, but you would be paying up to 10 years worth of penalty on that, and more of that later. Okay, weirdly, not everybody went for that in their droves, so eventually they came out and said, wow, 2015 scheme, you've got to join that one. That's a 154, so that equates to 1.85%. And I'll explain more about that in a second, about how that works. The key thing is that the normal pension age became state retirement age. So for some of you, that will be 67. For some of you, that'll be 68 and could be longer later on. However, you can go earlier with a penalty. And after all, it all depends on your magic number. Okay, so I think it's also, and we'll cover these as we go through, it's also really pertinent to think about the fact that there are other benefits implicit within your NHS pension. There are ill health retirement pension benefits. There are death in service benefits, dependents pensions. And here's the key thing. Of course, it does provide you with a guaranteed index-linked income for the rest of your life. A guaranteed index-linked income for the rest of your life when you retire. That is gold dust. It is an unfunded scheme, which means that what you pay in each month doesn't actually make much of a difference to what you get out. What you get out is dependent upon how long you're in the scheme and what you earn whilst you're in the scheme. Okay, if you were to pay what you pay into the pension scheme into a private arrangement, you are not going to get the same level of benefits. You will not be getting, for that amount you get in, you would not get the same amount of guaranteed index-linked income for the rest of your life as you will through the pension. It is worth remembering that before you decide on any other harebrained schemes. Not having said that, there may be distinct circumstances where getting out of the scheme might be appropriate, but we would say this would be the starting point of any planning. So what is a care scheme, a career average revalued earnings? Basically, every year, a percentage of your earnings go into a pot. I actually think I prefer to think this as a spreadsheet, mainly because that's just how I'm wired. Column 1 is year's service. Column 2 is what you've earned in that year. Column 3 is 1/54th of that amount. There is a further column. But if you think year 1 earned 50,000, 1/54th, so the column C, should I say, it's a spreadsheet, is £925. What that means is if you only have 1 year in the pension scheme, when you come to retire, you would get £925 a year, guaranteed, index linked, inflation proofed for the rest of your life. Year 2, you still earn 50,000. You get another 925 put in there, which means you now have, should you retire, £1,850 a year, guaranteed, index linked for the rest of your life when you retire. And so on and so on. So after 4 years, that's 3,700, and so on and so on and so on. So it matches what you earn, 1/54th each time. And if you want a lump sum, you sacrifice some of that to create a lump sum. Now, I think we're all very aware of the impact of inflation over time. The cost of living crisis is still hurting us all, I think. So we're all conscious that that first £925 in year 1 will not buy the same volume of goods and services as it did 30 years later. So what the pension scheme does do is every year it operates, it indexes, it calls it dynamisation. It increases each line of your spreadsheet by CPI, so the Consumer Prices Index, plus 1.5%. So whilst you're an active member, you're always increasing above inflation. The inflation announcement you're looking forward to is the one in October every year, because it tells you about the September increase. It's that September number plus 1.5%. So for those remember back the real crisis times, a couple of years back, inflation was 10.1% that September. So your pension pot will have increased by 11.6%, which is not bad for it just sitting there. Obviously, that had a problem, that caused a problem with our annual allowance, but there you go. So the point is, it's a really good scheme, and it increases at a fast rate compared to anything else. However, if that's not enough for you, there are 3 ways in which you can enhance the benefits of your pension scheme. So number 1 is you can buy additional pension. Number 2, you can contribute into what's called an ABC, an additional voluntary contribution contract. Or number 3, you can purchase an early retirement reduction buyout. So what do they mean? Well, additional pension, pretty straightforward. Theoretically, there's a way you can buy up to an additional £8,000 a year of guaranteed index-linked income at retirement by paying for it now. You can choose a sum up to that in chunks of £250, and basically, depending on how long you've got between now and retirement, the longer that is, the lower the amount of monthly premium that you'll have to pay to get that guaranteed benefit. Brilliant. The only downside is, of course, it has the same retirement age as the scheme, so it's state retirement. And if you were going any earlier, planning to go earlier than that, then it would also face an actuarial reduction, a penalty for going earlier. So you'd have to look at crunch the numbers on that. Is that going to be the best way of doing it? Could well be. Depends what your magic number is. AVCs then, additional voluntary contributions. Basically, it's like having a personal pension attached to your scheme, but only loosely, because this is one where what you get out very much depends on what you put in and how it performs. The main benefit, I guess, is that it's not tied to the same retirement age, so you can actually draw those benefits independent of state retirement. Okay. You can make regular payments, you can pay in lump sums, and you will be able to claim back tax relief. Now, when you make a payment, as you do monthly, into the NHS pension scheme, you do get tax relief at source on those payments. That you just don't pay income tax and national insurance on those, on that. With the AVCs, you have to claim it back. It will at source, it will assume you've 20% reduction, but the additional 20%, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you claim back through your tax return. What you get back is a pot of money at the end, and you'd go, okay, so what do I do with this? You could take the lot in one go and take a big hit for income tax, because it would be taxable at normal income tax rates, or you could draw it as an income, or a mixture of capital and income. So it is a flexible. What you get back, i.e. the size of the pot, depends upon fund performance. The downside of this is you don't get advice with it. So deciding how much to put in and which fund to be putting it in is not available. You just have to make the choice to take the risk yourself. The upside, though, is the charging of the individual funds is slightly lower because of the relationship with the main scheme. So a good option. On to early retirement reduction buyout. This is a really interesting one. New as a concept with the 15 scheme. So basically, as I've said, you retire at your state retirement age, which could be 67, could be 68. You can buy, and you can retire at those ages without penalty. Go any earlier, there's a penalty. This allows you to buy those penalties off early. So if you're due to retire at 68, you could say, I want to buy back 3 years, thanks. And that would mean you'd be able to retire at 65 without penalty. All right, you'd be missing 3 years worth of service, but you'd be able to buy that back without penalty. And what you do is you pay for it up front, in effect. So the longer, again, it is before your retirement, the lower that cost will be. The catch is that you're buying the years. So if in future government says, actually, you know, your state retirement was 68, it's now 70, then you've bought 3 years. So your normal retirement then would be 67. Okay, so it's just to be aware of that. The other thing is you can't go below 65. So if your state retirement is 67, then you can only buy 2 years. So if you are a long way from retirement, there is a greater risk of that age moving. So the younger you are, the less valuable this is in terms of it may move. But of course, it'd be cheaper, and you would still be buying back years with a penalty. So one to think about and to crunch the numbers. And let's give you therefore an idea of what that means to you. So what you have here is the potential impact on the different schemes. Okay, so in the 95 section, if you still got those benefits, going before the age of 60, if you went 5 years early, you'd see your pension reduced by 20% and a 11.2% reduction in the lump sum. With 2008, so going at 60, so 5 years early, 21.9% reduction. And if you were to go 5 years early in the 2015 scheme, that would be a 23.1%. So if you think that your state retirement is 67, if you went 10 years early, that's almost half your pension gone. That sounds like an issue. It all depends on what your magic number is. This could still be the quickest and most efficient way of you getting to that magic number, which is why assessing what you're going to need is a really important thing to do. If you don't want to work to state retirement and you're looking at the options, it is really important to do something earlier because, again, the earlier you start planning for this, the less costly it's going to be for you to get there. Okay. So there we go. Right, some of the trip hazards. Annual allowance. Okay, so annual allowance is a limit on the amount of tax relief you can receive, in effect. So what happens is you are allowed to have an input into regulated pensions of £60,000 a year. Okay. If you input more than that, the government is saying that's fine, but we're going to charge you and in effect reclaim back the tax relief you've had. Now, I will reiterate here, this, because it's your pension here, this doesn't actually apply to the amount you're paying each month. The 60,000, because you might be going, well, I'm not paying as much as 60,000 into my NHS pension. But it's not about that. It's about the growth in your pension, because if it is it's not a final salary, but it's a defined benefit scheme. So what they do is they go, okay, so what was your pension worth to you at the start of the year? Let's say it was worth £1,000 a year to you. Okay. And then they say, okay, so, and by the end of the year, based upon the fact that you've contributed in, your 1/54th of your earnings have gone in, and we've had some growth through the inflation, etc. What's it worth to you at the end of the year? Let's say it's now worth £2,000. Well, let's say, okay, so it's grown by £1,000. Well, that £1,000, we multiply that by a factor of 16. So the amount we'll test against the 60,000 is 16,000. You're okay. Brilliant. Now, clearly, the further along you get, the bigger your pot becomes, the bigger the impact of inflation, and actually that your earnings mean that, and particularly if you take a jump in earnings, that spike could be significant and could be more than 60,000, at which point that would be in effect taxed at your highest marginal rate, claiming back the tax relief. Now, the good news is if in any of the previous 3 years you haven't used all of your allowance, and that first example you'd only use 16,000 worth, you can carry that unused amount forward. So it may be that if you have 1 year that stands out, you've taken on a new job, you've had you've become a partner, you've had a spike in earnings, etc., then you might actually be able to mitigate that potential bill by the previous years where you haven't used up all the allowance. The other thing to say is at that point you can opt for the scheme to pay that bill for you. You can opt to look at this and go, okay, I can't afford to pay that. Apply to the scheme, and they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, we'll cover the bill. You pay us back out of your pot of money when you retire, and we'll charge a bit of interest on it in the meantime. So potentially that's a way around not being able to afford to pay that bill. But it means you can stay in the pension and accruing benefits. Remember with this, the number one thing as a GP is to have a good medical accountant. So that, again, you need a good medical accountant. The most important bit of that is that they will understand this. They will actually say to you, an accountant may turn around and say, well, you want to jump out the pension scheme because then you won't hit the annual allowance. That's true, but you might not achieve your goal of retiring when you want to retire on the amount you want to retire in the same way. So that might cause you a problem. You need to have someone who understands it. But be clear, you pay an accountant to reduce your tax bill. What you pay a financial advisor to do is to come and tell you what it means for you and the course of action that you should be taking to make sure you achieve your goals. Now, if you're a particularly high earner, there is a further problem with annual allowance in that if you're earning more than 200,000 after you take off pension contributions, they test you. And if, including pension contributions, you're earning more than 260, they start reducing the annual allowance. So if you're earning over 320,000, you're only allowed 10,000 going into your pension scheme. That's one to then really look very hard about being a member of the pension scheme in that year, and looking at scheme pays, looking at your options. What does that mean for your planning? Okay, right. So lifetime allowance used to be a further bane to everybody's life. There used to be a cap on the amount you could pay and have as a pot of money. That was scrapped. But what they did keep is the limit on the amount of tax-free money you can take out. So you can take up to 25% of your pot out, free of income and capital gains tax. So what they did is they've linked that to what was the old lifetime allowance. So the maximum you can take out of any pensions as a total, be it personal pensions as well as the pension scheme itself, is £268,275. All right. That is one we were looking at in the budget last year and going, are they gonna make that? Are they gonna make that lower? Are they gonna try to take money there? They didn't, which was a big relief. And we're not sure what that means for long term. They've also introduced a death benefit. So the amount that you can take out of a personal pension, or indeed this scheme, as a lump sum on your death. Well, say not you take it out, your beneficiaries take out as lump sum as opposed to income, and that is now limited. I'm very sorry, I've just realized this slide is wrong. Someone's put that wrong. It is 1,073,100. I should be going back to the marketing people. They've put that in the wrong place. So please be aware of that. If any of you have been around long enough to have any protection from previous lifetime allowance, that is the amount that this is tested against. Okay, but realistically, if you're growing a pension, you don't really need to worry about that side of things. Right, so let's put you in the situation of going, well, okay, I've done that bit of self-reflection about what I might need in the future. I've worked that out. That's brilliant. We've got a good idea there. I'm looking at the NHS pension scheme, and although that probably will get me there when I'm 68, I'm not sure I want to work that long. I might, but I'd like the option to go earlier if I want. How else can I do it? Well, as we've talked about, you've got additional pension in terms of, or AVC with the pension scheme, or you could look to personal pensions, and there's a wide variety of those. Where you basically go and get advice as to how else could I do that. Again, very tax efficient. You could use other savings vehicles such as ISAs, unit trusts, OICs, the full gamut of other investment plans, looking at tax efficiency and crucially, make sure it matches your personal attitude to risk. Retire and return. We're looking at your options there about how you could mold your retirement. I'll come to those in a second. Having a good cash basis, very important. Make sure you've got your emergency fund and your 0 to 5 year money all nicely in cash so you can look at longer term investing. Property, people love to have buy-to-lets. It's always good if you can afford to get on that particular ladder, but also be aware that they're not as tax efficient as used to be, and the having tenants isn't always a joy. And of course, there's if you're in private practice or running your own limited company, be aware of that. You can utilize that income. Now, that's something I should have said earlier. One of the key things, some of you as sessional GPs will have been told by your accountant, the best thing since sliced bread is to run as a limited company. From a income tax point of view, absolutely it is. Brilliant. Question is that the case? And we'll come to that in a little bit. Right. Partial retirement. One of the key things that you get with a pension scheme. In the olden days, there was a thing called 24-hour retirement, where you could say, right, I want to retire. And then you'd come back, you'd have a day off, and you'd come back in the first month. You only work a maximum of 16 hours a week. So you basically everyone would just go and have a month off. And then you'd come back and you carry on working, but you're taking your pension as well, etc. If you're taking your full pension and working, you're paying an awful lot of tax. It's not very efficient. So that has now changed. You can still do retire and rejoin if you're not wanting to work. So you can do that. But the additional of partial retirement is really important. And what that does is it allows you to take a portion of your pension. So if your thing is, well, do you know what? I'd like to go down to maybe working 3 sessions a week. All right. Or however you want to do that. I want to carry on working longer, but not at full pace. Well, okay, so all I need to do is take a portion of my pension that means that I don't actually take a reduction in my lifestyle by doing that. So you can actually mold and design your retirement strategy all the way through to saying, actually, I'm done now. I'm on my way. Thanks very much. Okay, right. Last bit until we're into the key questions. Right, sick pay. So key things to think about. If you are locuming as self-employed or a limited company, you don't have any sick pay. If you're a salaried GP, it's very much based upon your contract. So whatever you signed, hopefully you read it. As a partner, it's based upon your partnership agreement, and obviously your responsibility or otherwise for funding locum. Again, I hope you've read your partnership agreement before you signed it. I hope there is one. Very rare these days, but it is always good to make sure you do have one. Right, so that's general sick pay, but what about the long term? Well, what you do get with the pension scheme is you get your ill health retirement pension. It is, when I say you get, it is a discretionary award. Tier 1 is paid if you can demonstrate, and they agree, the panel agree, that you can no longer be a GP doing your duties you can permanently are incapable of doing those duties. They may well pay you out your tier 1 benefits, and that is whatever pension you've accrued to date, and you can have that now without penalty, so it's guaranteed instantly for the rest of your life. If you're younger, not as useful, but if you're older, much more useful if you get that. Tier 2 is if you're permanently incapable of doing any job. So obviously the definition of you not being able to do anything compared to being a GP, you've got to be a lot sicker. You probably know better than I what kind of illness, excuse me, that would entail. But what they would then do is pay out what you've accrued to date plus a proportion of what they would deem you would have accrued between now and your normal retirement. So much more generous. Okay, you also get a death in service, which is equivalent to a lump sum. Again, not you, your beneficiaries. And there are dependents pensions, which again, it's a proportion of what you would have received on the tier 2 ill health, because yes, death is deemed a reason why you can't do a job. So your beneficiaries, so your spouse would get the a portion of your pension you would have got, and if you've got children under the age of 23, there's a portion paid for them as well. So really generous benefits that are available to you. Right. So thanks for bearing with me on that. Now a little less of me and a little bit more of the real expert in the room, which is James. Now we've set that sort of benchmark, just have a look a little bit more at those questions that are more meaningful for you as an audience. So let's start with the one I alluded to earlier. What if I'd been set up in a limited company by my accountant because he said, that is a brilliant thing to do? James, what are things to think about?
I'd completely agree. It is a great way to mitigate tax because obviously as money goes into your limited company, you won't be paying any tax on that income until you draw it. The problem you've got is that whilst it's sitting there, you can't draw it. You need that money for your cost of living, but also you can't fund your NHS pension. So money from a limited company can't fund your NHS pension. So you've got to look at alternative ways to save for your future to get that number, like that Simon said. And the alternative ways would be down the route of personal private pensions funded by the limited company. If you're in a fortunate position where you've built up an amount of wealth sitting in that limited company, there are different types of investments that your accountant would also encourage you to do because it's a tax advantage. I'm not saying a limited company is not a bad thing. It is a good thing to do, but what you could be doing there is freezing the income you've got now when you may need it, but also you're delaying your retirement strategy as well. One final thing on the limited, the tax on money coming out of your limited company will change year on year. The dividend allowance is now dropped to £500 that you can draw. So that's all you're going to be getting tax-free from your limited company. So as good as it does sound, always make sure you cover all the bases.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's right. And the other thing to think about is as a sessional GP, if you're working multiple roles, then potentially having at least one of those roles as self-employed, whilst that seems to make things more complicated, would mean that you could be an active member of the pension scheme. So that would allow for the dynamisation, the increase above inflation each year, on the benefits that you've already accrued through time previous to becoming a limited company. So something to think about in terms of working the system to your benefit, and weighing up saving tax now for potentially losing out on benefit later. So definitely one to think about. Which moves me on to the next question, which is particularly pertinent for sessional GPs, but it's true for everybody in primary care, and that's how do I keep track of my NHS pension? How do I know what's in it? So what can you do to help with us there?
The simplest thing with this would be to log on to the Total Reward website. And if you were to go into any search engine, type in NHS pension, Total Rewards website, it will take you to the link, or it will be the My NHS Pension website. It's the new one. And I encourage all my clients to get a copy of their statements at least once a year. Now, the frustrating thing with practitioner pension is that it will always be a year behind. Whether you are a locum, employed, or a partner, it will always be a year behind. And when I say a year behind, it will be the previous tax year. So most statements now will be updated to 23-24 tax year. And they're currently working on the current tax year, obviously, because it's not been submitted. If your statement isn't there, I would always encourage you to send them an email, give them a call. You are allowed one statement a year at no cost. And it's imperative you get this, because if you've got multiple incomes coming in from different parts of the NHS as a sessional GP, you want to make sure that it's all coming in together into that one pot. And what it won't show you is the separated amounts. So on your dynamisation sheet on the 2015, it will have your combined total pensionable earnings. And if you've got work with NHS England, and then work, when I say work, but as you're employed directly by NHS England, and then you're a locum, and then a salaried GP, that's 3 income streams. You need to make sure you're completing your Type 2 forms every single year, because those forms will go to the PCSE. The PCSE then send the data to NHS pensions. And it only takes one break in that chain for you to have a missing year. And you will you won't know any difference, because you're paying your contributions from your salary, from your end of year accounts, thinking I'm building up my pot. And before you know it, you are 5 years away from retirement, looking at your statement thinking, what's gone wrong? It's not accurate. It's easier to fix a statement in a small window, the odd year or two, than try and go back 10, 20 years to a practice you no longer work for, and that practice no longer exists. So it's imperative every year you want to download your statement, and they typically get updated between August to October. Anything else?
Well, the only thing I would add to that is for anybody on the call that has been affected by the McLeod judgment. So that's primarily those who have 95 scheme benefits going back to 2012. So I appreciate that's quite some time ago. But anybody that has been impacted by them, you want to be looking out for your statements as they come out post April this year, and we're not sure how quickly after April they will be available, but say normally it's August to October. But because the information on there will show you 2 different outcomes, and much more useful deciding well, helping you make choices in your longer term pension planning. If you've never been a member of the 95 section, 2008 section, ignore what I've just said, because that's just confusing things. But for those of you that do have that, you are probably aware of McLeod, and if not, come speak to us separately about that. But yeah, absolutely, total reward statements are key. And moving on to that, and I think that's partly this question as well. So, you know, what if you are moving around jobs, you know, what are the key things to look out for?
Before I jump onto that question, William's made a very good point. I mentioned the word practitioner. There are two types of NHS pensions. There's the practitioner pension, which is every GP, and then there's the officer pension. The officer pension is everyone else, whether you're a hospital doctor, a nurse, a receptionist, a pharmacist, an employed pharmacist by the NHS, you will be in the officer scheme. But for GPs, it's the practitioner. So I just wanted to just clarify that terminology. But great point, thank you, William.
Yeah. Sorry, just on that, of course, pretty much everybody at some point, therefore, will have accrued some officer service when serving as in early years. So FY, etc., into VTS. So that's just to be aware of on the statements. But yeah, sorry, James.
That's okay. So what should I do if I move roles? First things first, contact. Ask them to opt you into the pension straight away. Get confirmation. Once you've had your first wage slip, make sure your pension contributions left it. That's a quick standard little test to always do. At the end of that financial year, again, get a copy of your total reward statement, your pension statement, and just add up, does my pensionable earnings for that tax year look accurate based on the roles that I've done? If you move roles within NHS England, everything in NHS England is in that one pension. If you go to NHS Wales or Scotland, they have their own pension. So if you are going, because we are quite close to North Wales, if you go across the border and work for NHS Wales, that's the pension it will go into. If it's for a short period of time and you come back to NHS England or vice versa, you do have a small window to have that pension transferred over to the pension you wish to continue to be in. If you fail to do so, when you go to retire, you will have an NHS England pension, NHS Wales, or NHS Scotland. They're completely different schemes.
It's a really, really good point. The amount of time that people have to take unpicking service in one of the other in one of the four countries is significant, and as you said, you know, it's an awful lot easier to do that when it was last year rather than I really want to retire. I need to fill out my AW8, which is the form you fill out to nominate retirement, and you're going, I don't think my benefits are right. That's not the time to be doing it. So just stay on top of it. So cool. Again, getting ahead of myself with the previous thing. So service from time in foundation years, what does happen to that?
You pretty much answered it before, but all your time served in the foundation years will be transferred over to your practitioner. So on your pension statement, it will have the date you joined the NHS. And if you're in the 1995 scheme, on the dynamisation sheet, your first years of contributions will be the first year contributions into the practitioner. And the gap from that year back to when you joined NHS, that is your foundation, your officer years, and they will be slowly dynamised into your NHS pension. That's for the 95 scheme. For the 2015 scheme, you're completely in the care scheme. So your years serviced in the foundation will automatically be there. And you will see this on your statement. It will be on the last page where it shows you at the end of the tax year, your pensionable earnings. The pension accrued is the 154th. And then the revalued, as Simon said before, is your 1.5% plus CPI. And that will be kind of like a spreadsheet of your little pension pots that you're building year on year.
Okay. And I guess the final question then is, and again we've kind of touched on it, is if you've got issues, who you're going to speak to, who are the people to badger about this?
The list is endless. No, I'm joking. Depending on the query, you have an excellent service at NHS BSA. They have a fantastic website. It is sometimes looking for a needle in a haystack, but their search engine is brilliant. If you just type in your query, you will take you straight to that page. If it is a query relating to your pension statement doesn't look accurate, I would then go to the NHS Pensions Direct via email or give them a call and just explain why you think it's not correct, and they will advise you the reasons why. And 9 times out of 10, it can be linked to the PCSE. You've then got to go directly to the PCSE and find out what's missing. Has there been a type 2 form, a locum form? Has there been something that's been missed off? These service queries can be resolved in a couple of weeks for 1 year in question. But if you're trying to fix several years, it can take a lot longer. And the majority of the time, you will probably say that's tomorrow's problem. And tomorrow's problem becomes a year. And before you know it, like I said before, you're 5 years away from retirement, trying to find those missing years. So any service queries you get, contact the NHS BSA website, or speak to your medical accountant, or speak to your medical financial advisor.
And just to reiterate that, yeah, it's NHS Business Services Authority. So NHS BSA is what you need to Google. It is a really great site. They've got quite a bit of information that is sort of more generic, more broad brush, but there are some pretty detailed things. The thing to look out for is the member portal in there. Although having a wander around the employer portal is also quite informative in terms of how things are worked out on your behalf. But absolutely, that and primary support in England is really, really important. So yes, just stay on top of it, I think is the answer. Right, so hopefully that's sort of given you a bit of a flavour there of the things to consider as sessional GPs. And just sort of summarise here where we've got to. Why is it important to get advice? Well, look, what we do day in, day out is we sit down and we help people plan. We do something in particular very hot on is cash flow modelling. It's a lovely bit of jargon, but what it basically means is we will sit down with our customers and look at income and expenditure now, projected income and expenditure in the future, looking at those objectives we talked about in terms of where do you want to be living, who do you want to be living with, what are you going to be doing, so we can actually look at what does your life look like between now and the grave in effect, and then we can plot and plan beyond that in terms of your current income and expenditure. What does that look like? Does it work? Does it fit? What are your opportunities? What are your threats? And in particular, looking at saying, okay, so are you on track? Using pension reports where we can take a statement and actually project into the future based on some pretty simple assumptions as to what that might deliver for you. So that's the sort of planning that you should be able to do. Understand impact of the changes in the pension as they come along. As I say, great news is you've got partial retirement as one of the key changes for those with 95 benefits. We've got the McLeod changes that have gone on, and so far we've had no changes from the new government in terms of pension taxation per se. There's just if you've got pension pots that stay in your estate in 2 years' time, they are meant to be taxable as they weren't previously, but we'll see. But just to be aware of what all that means for you as an individual. Look at the ways to boost your retirement, whether it be with the pension scheme, whether it be outside of the pension scheme. And as I say, to review your portfolio, full stop. How are you growing your wealth? How are you making the best use of the income you do have coming in to make sure you achieve your personal aims? And also, really important, making sure that your loved ones are looked after in terms of your early demise, or even more importantly, if you are off long-term sick, because you're around to see the consequences. So let's just make sure threats are dealt with, as well as looking at the exciting times ahead of retiring and doing these skydiving, golf, or pruning the roses that you want to do in retirement. And obviously then review regularly. Very important, just to keep up to speed with the pace of change that there has been, to make sure that your plans are on track. Final bit then, if you did want to engage with us, it doesn't cost you anything to sit down and have initial consultations with us, so that you can understand how we might be able to support you. Please use the QR code there, and come and talk to us. And James could well be the chap you would talk to, depending where you are in Cheshire, and hopefully we'll be able to help you. Okay, so questions.
There's been a couple of questions that have come up in the chat. Firstly, I think it was Christian, it's quite a long time ago that this one was asked, about pausing pension contributions for 6 months and the consequences.
Yep, sorry, I've been going through the questions on the chat as well. I missed that one. Sorry, Christian. So my question to my client would be, yeah, well, you've actually, why would you want to pause it? If it is due to a cash flow for as a locum, how dramatic is the impact? The easiest way to think about this is that in the 2015 scheme, it's the curve scheme. So your pensionable earnings at the end of the tax year, you will receive 1/54th. Now, if you've only got 6 months of that year, well, you'll get 1/54th of that 6 months pensionable earnings. So you can self-calculate to think, right, if I earn X amount of pounds for the full year, but I'm only going to contribute 6 months, well, what's the 1/54th of that 6 months? And whatever that amount is, that's the pension you're going to receive when you go to retire at the scheme age. So the good thing about the care scheme, you can work as much or as little as you need and pay into the pension, and it saves having to go, having the best of the last 3 years towards your retirement. One thing I will say is that when you do go over 12 months of not paying into the scheme, you can become a deferred member, and becoming a deferred member will impact some of the benefits you would receive from NHS. So a deferred member is that you've not paid it for at least 12 months, and let's say hypothetically you were unable to work due to ill health, and you apply for ill health retirements, which Simon mentioned before, tier 1 and tier 2. If you're a deferred member, you've got to qualify for tier 2 to get tier 1. So the restrictions are a lot more. It can also impact your death in service. Becoming a deferred member, your death in service could potentially be reduced from being 2 times your practitioner earnings to 3 times the pension income you've accrued year to date, subject to the scheme. So before opting out of the scheme from a cash flow point of view, just have a little look. How is that going to impact my pension for the future? How can I recoup that loss into the future? And what other benefits is it going to impact if I don't continue?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think that's spot on. I think there's a difference between doing it for cash flow and doing it for trying to do the accountancy dance around annual allowance. Because you have to take a pragmatic view. But as James has said, it's a matter of understanding quite clearly that you have reduced the amount of income you will get at retirement. If it's a one-off situation because of circumstances, sounds great. If it becomes a habit, you potentially could really undermine what you're doing in terms of growing for retirement. The good news is if it is just 6 months, as James said, you would stay as a full member, an active member, and you still get the dynamisation. So yeah, it's one of those. If in a case of emergency, break glass, I think is the way to look at it.
There's a question here. 1995, how does McLeod affect me? Do you want that one, Simon?
Okay, it is a whole separate webinar.
It is, yeah.
If you've got 95 benefits, it basically means that currently your total reward statement will show that you were still in the 95 up until 2022. Okay, as of 2022, everybody that was still an active member was moved into 2015. But for the 7 years between being made to go into it in 2015 and 2022, in effect, you will get a choice when you come to retire. And you could say, I either want those benefits to be in the 95 scheme or in the 2015. So you'll get a choice. 95 scheme will allow you to take the money at 60 without penalty. However, the 2015 is growing at a much faster rate. It's growing at 1.85% instead of 1.4%. So it really depends on what you're looking to get out of it. It could well be that retiring at, say, 62, 63, you would end up being better off having that money in the 2015 scheme. What will happen, as I say, after April is the next round of statements will show, or should show, they are legally obliged to do it, they will show you both options so that when you get nearer to retirement, you'll be able to see quite clearly which is going to be more beneficial for you. And the first point would be at the earliest you can take pensions of going, okay, what's my plan? Which one fits it best? And and you can model that. So come to us if you want more on the weird and wonderful world of McLeod. Please do contact us. But in essence, that's what it boils down to.
I've just put a link on the chat, which gives a good overview of the McLeod and the 2023 pension changes as well. I mentioned before about specialist medical accountants. I put a link on a bit earlier relating to the Association of Independent Specialist Medical Accountants. It's a search engine where you can find the nearest medical accountant closest to you.
I cannot stress enough, sorry, James, I cannot stress enough the importance of having a good medical accountant. I once did the talk at RCGP conference and someone approached me and said, so hang on, this annual allowance thing, it's not based on what I pay in. I'm like, no, it's based upon the growth. Now, my accountant says it's what you pay in. I went, no, it's based on your growth. And that person following contact had a big tax bill to suddenly pay because they'd had an annual allowance problem and their accountant hadn't spotted it. So please get yourself a medical one.
Yeah. And if you do opt to do any private or personal pensions, the contributions you make on those pensions need to be added to the growth and the contributions to your NHS, and that's where the 60,000 limit can be breached. And having the medical accountant or an accountant who understands the NHS pension, that's the key part. You've got to understand how the NHS pension is calculated, will guide you on how much to pay into a pension for that tax year. And as your earnings start to increase, the second you go over a certain threshold, you hit additional rate tax. You've even got the risk of losing your personal allowance. There are ways of utilizing pensions via carry forward to get back that tax saving. Any other questions that I may have missed?
William popped in a question around top tips for GPs picking a portfolio career.
Well, I would, refer to what we said before. Well, I'd start with brilliant, enjoy it, because we deal with a lot of those in primary care who do exactly that, and I find it very fulfilling. The key thing is that portfolio careers can involve not just the NHS pension scheme, but potentially the university's pension scheme if you're going to do some work on that side of things. It could be absolutely, you could be doing things on employed, self-employed, partnership, and limited company basis. So there's you depending on the roles that you go for. So from a financial planning point of view, number one, understand that not everybody will look at your amazing earnings and see them for what they are. So I'm particularly thinking there about mortgages. So if you're on a portfolio career, but you're also wanting to get a nice big house, not every mortgage lender will look at the fact that you've only got a couple of weeks worth of accounts in your limited company or as a self-employed and go, yeah, you're a good bet, we'll lend you all the money you want. So just be conscious that you may have to be very careful about being able to evidence your earning for other parties. That's the number one. The joint number one is what we just said. It's the medical accountants. Otherwise, it is exactly what James has said, is for those roles, and bear in mind that, as I say, they could be across from a salaried GP perspective, they could be from a partnership perspective, they could be from a university's perspective. Sitting down at least once a year and going, what have I accrued? Is the statement correct? Have they actually accounted for those that were pensionable? That's got to be the next most important thing. James.
Also, two of the key things I would raise is that if you're earning X amount of pounds in one part of the NHS England, and then you're earning a little bit more with another employed NHS England role, if both those incomes combined take you over the next contribution level in your NHS pension, you need to inform both employers. Because if you are paying a reduced amount of pension contribution based on your combined earnings, eventually you may have to pay that back. So it's looking at your total pensionable earnings in the NHS, but from an employed point of view. And that will also link into the self-employed as well, because you need to be making the same contributions. On the website to put on before the NHS pension website, it will show you the thresholds as your percentages will change. The second point with a portfolio, as Simon said before, about the mortgages, it's other part of your financial planning. If you've got a portfolio, it's looking at, well, what if I'm actually off ill? What if I'm unable to work and I've got a portfolio employment? What is my sick benefit for every single employment? Because it would be very unlikely that they will match. If you're working for a practice and they offer you they honor you the BMA contract, then great. If you work for a PCN itself may offer you a different contract. So it's knowing that if you've got all this income coming in, if you go off work, what are you actually going to receive sick pay straight away? Because if we all live to our means, and if we're off ill, you may not get enough income coming in for the short period of time. So have a look at what have I got and what's my contingency. And if you don't have a contingency, then it's something you've got to look into. And the earlier you look at this, the more flexible the policy will be as your career changes.
Really good show.
Helen, have I missed anyone?
I don't think we've missed anyone. What we have had are queries about making sure that records are complete. And there's been quite a lot of chat. William put in about understanding the PCSE escalation process. I don't know if you want to add anything to how to make sure records are complete other than working through a specialist medical accountant.
You can request a service extract statement from NHS Pensions Direct or an employment contribution history, and that will show you all the contributions, the time served in each employer. So it's a great way to see it. It's kind of like your pension CV, if you will. And you can see all your history you've got on there, and that will help with any claims that you've got with Capita. Um,
I don't think I've seen anything else coming through. If anyone wants to ask a question, do just raise your hand if you want to ask one verbally as well. I'm just checking through the chat, but I don't think I've missed anything. I've been doing notes as it's popped up. Anything else anyone would like to ask?
Oh, Carol's just put, can you repeat what we can request, please? So, James, do you want to just repeat? So for the TRS, what are they asking?
Oh, yes. So if when you go online, if it's not there, your pension statement, you can give them a call or send them an email and ask them for a current pension statement or total reward statement, if you will, to be sent to you through the post.
Hey, Heather, you've got a question.
Sorry. Hello. I'm affected by this McLeod judgment, and then when I did qualify as a GP earlier last year in the summer, couldn't get any work. So all I did was 2 locum sessions. That's all I could do. And I've ended up in a salaried position and also a position at the hospital. So it looks like I'm a practitioner and an officer. And how does that work? I mean, what am I when it comes to pensions? Am I an officer or a practitioner? Because I do job at the hospital and a job for the PCN.
Okay. So with that, everything's going to be going into the 2015 scheme from 2022. Yeah. So providing at the end of each financial year, your total pensionable earnings are exactly as you see them with all your income combined, your pension will be completely fine.
Right.
The officer and practitioner part, I would say, is more around the 1995 scheme.
Right. Well, I'm in the 1995 scheme.
Yeah, that won't change at all. That 95 scheme is now that's still there, but you won't be contributing anything more to the 95 scheme.
So just to be clear, that was the thing. As of 2022, all contributions, etc., all new service is in the 15. So your 95 is preserved. So because you're an active member, it will still grow in line with the dynamisation we talked about for any practitioner. But any officer stuff from before, so any hospital doctor roles from before, will be under the old final salary scheme, the 80th scheme, which is a whole other different kettle of fish. But it's all there on the statement. So what you will see on the statement is you will see the same breakdown of service for any of those roles, so which you can then judge against your own records. But from 2022 onwards, that they're now sealed, and it's all about the 2015, and the schemes are harmonized now, so it is the same scheme whether you work in a hospital or whether you work in primary care.
But obviously they've got different dates that you can take your pension, haven't they?
Yeah, so your 95 benefits, and this will be the choice that you get to make through McLeod, is from, well, let's just say from 60. You could go earlier with penalty, but let's say from 60, you'd be able to take your 1995 benefits free of penalty. So whatever you've got accrued there, you'd be able to draw that. And actually, there's a really good argument to say, well, why wouldn't you? Because you're eligible to take the benefit. There might be reasons, but so that'd be at that point. Your options then is, at that point you could then say, well, I'll take my 2015 as well, but you'd be taking a big old hit on the value of your pension. But that might be your magic number, so that might be just fine. But what you could do is you could take the 95, and if you're continuing to work, you could carry on paying into the 2015, which again is a change. So you can carry on being an active member of that whilst drawing your 95. Or you could say, well, I will defer. I'll take my 95, but I don't want to pay into the 15. There are a range of choices.
Okay.
At that point, you could also say, well, my magic number isn't quite there yet. I'm going to need it all in the 2015 because it grows faster. And all right, I accept. I might have to work a bit longer before I get there with the penalties, etc. But you could opt for that 7 years of your 95 scheme between 2015 and 2022. Those 7 years, you could say, no, I will have that ultimately as 2015 benefits and take a larger income later.
Okay, thank you.
There's been another couple of queries which have been answered in the chat around reckonable membership and contact for Scotland.
So yes, reckonable pay is a lower one. It's a final salary thing, and it basically boils down to it's an average of your best 3 years in the last 10 years of service, as far as that's concerned. So it's just a definition of what final salary looks like. And Scotland, yeah, good question.
I'll
NHS
put the website
Scotland.
on there. Yeah, it's
oh, the SPPA, right?
Yeah, so Scottish Public Pensions Agency. So they have all the public sector's pensions under one website, and the links on there takes you directly to the NHS part.
Okay, have we got any final questions? Just pop your hand up or type into chat. Or anything that we haven't picked up, haven't covered that you wanted to be raised or you put in the chat earlier. Nobody's raising their hand. I would like to say a very big thank you to James and Simon. That's been a really informative session, and I hope it has answered a lot of the questions that you've had today. There's a lot of information here in the chat, a lot of links that you will find really useful. And the presentation will also be circulated, which has got the contact details so that you can contact Wesleyan for additional help and advice should you wish to do so. For presentations also on the final slide, I don't know if you can pop it up again, but if you can pop it up again, we've got a QR code there just so that you can complete an evaluation form so that you can give us feedback, but also so you can let Cheshire LMC know what other sessions would be useful on the subject of pensions or on the subject of anything else. So there's a link there. There's the QR code coming up in the chat from Sam for you to complete the survey and say what else would be helpful. But a very big thank you again to James and Simon, and thank you to William for inviting us to put this session on for you. And I do hope that it has been useful today. So thank you very much for attending, and it's been an absolute pleasure to chair the session. Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
William.
Thanks.
Cheers.